What happens when a chance encounter in a locker room leads to a tangled web of attraction? Meet Ryan, a dedicated employee whose ordinary life takes a thrilling turn when he accidentally walks in on his boss's wife, Laura. What starts as an embarrassing moment quickly spirals into a flirtatious connection that neither of them can ignore. Can they keep their growing feelings under wraps? Or will the consequences of their actions catch up with them? Join us for this captivating tale, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing stories. I've been with the company for over 5 years now. It's not exactly the most glamorous position, but it covers the bills, and I get along well with my colleagues. The daily routine is familiar and predictable. I'm a straightforward guy, nothing too fancy. I was married once, but that didn't work out. My ex-wife and I separated about a year ago. We have 2 teenagers who live with her, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I don't mind living alone. It's just the way things turned out. So, one Tuesday morning, I arrive at work like usual. I park my car, grab my bag, and walk into the building. As soon as I step inside, I can sense the weight of another long day ahead. I'm just looking forward to changing into my work clothes, getting the job done, and heading home. I make my way down the hallway toward the locker room. I've been using this locker room for years, so I'm used to the routine. I store my things in a locker, change into my work uniform, and get ready to start the day. Nothing unusual about that. Except today, it was different. I push open the locker room door, and right in the center, I see something I didn't expect at all. Laura, my boss's wife, is standing in front of the mirror adjusting her outfit. She wasn't fully dressed, but she wasn't entirely undressed either. Just enough for the situation to feel incredibly awkward. For a moment, I froze, unsure of what to do. It was one of those instances where your brain just stops working. The door hadn't even fully opened, and there she was. Laura, my boss's wife, in a half-dressed state. Immediately, I realized I had walked in on something I shouldn't have seen. I wasn't clueless, though. I knew this wasn't some playful, flirtatious situation. It was just an unfortunate accident. The first thing I did was quickly step back, out of the locker room, slam the door behind me, and cover my face, my cheeks turning bright red. "Oh my God," I mumbled under my breath, standing there for a second trying to process what had just happened. What on earth was she doing in the locker room? I'd never seen her there before. Was she visiting the office? Was she looking for someone? I had no clue, but I knew I had just made one of the most awkward mistakes of my life. I didn't know what to do. I thought she might walk out and say something like, "Hey, it's no big deal," or "It happens." But no, the locker room stayed silent. My heart was racing in my chest as I tried to act like everything was fine, even though it clearly wasn't. For the rest of the morning, I couldn't get the image of her out of my mind. I felt so embarrassed, like I had done something wrong. And worse, I didn't know how she was going to react. Was she going to pretend it didn't happen? Would she avoid me from now on? I had no idea. I figured I'd just keep my head down, do my job, and hope that the whole thing would blow over without anyone mentioning it again. But then, a couple of days later, things began to feel strange. Laura started behaving differently around me. At first, it wasn't obvious, but I began to notice it. She'd catch my eye in the hallway, give me a little smile, or strike up small talk more often than usual. I couldn't help but wonder if she was doing it on purpose. Maybe trying to make me feel more at ease after the locker room incident. But it wasn't just small talk anymore. There was something more. I noticed her glancing at me more frequently, and there was an undeniable tension in the air. I couldn't quite place it, but it was there, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. My co-workers started teasing me, asking if I was getting special treatment from Mrs. Robinson. My boss's wife, of course. That's when I realized that maybe this wasn't going to blow over as quickly as I had hoped. After the whole locker room thing, I did what any guy would do. I tried to pretend it never happened. I got back into my usual routine, clocking in, doing my job, and keeping a low profile. But things weren't as straightforward as they used to be. Laura, my boss's wife, began acting differently toward me. At first, it was just little things, like a smile when we crossed paths in the hallway, or a slightly longer look when we bumped into each other at the coffee machine. I'm not someone who reads too much into small gestures, but it was hard to ignore. Then it became even stranger. She'd stop by my desk to chat about office topics, but would always steer the conversation towards something more personal, like asking how my day was going, or if I'd seen any good movies lately. It wasn't normal. She had never acted like this before. One day, she came by my desk again, holding a cup of coffee. I was just finishing up a project, barely glancing up, but I could feel her eyes on me. "So, how's everything going?" she asked, leaning against the edge of my cubicle. Her tone wasn't just friendly, it was almost warm. Too warm, if that makes sense. "Everything's fine," I replied, trying to sound casual, but I could tell she wasn't really asking about work. "Good," she said with a slight smile. There was a pause, and then she added, "You know, I've been thinking, you're a really hard worker, Ryan. I've noticed how dedicated you are. It's nice to see that." She stared at me for a second, and I could feel my heart rate quicken. Was this just a compliment, or was there something more behind it? I laughed nervously. "Thanks. I just do my job, you know?" "I know," she responded, tilting her head slightly. "But it's more than that. I think you've got potential." The way she said it made it clear that it wasn't just about my work. There was something else, something unspoken. I wasn't sure how to reply. I knew she wasn't simply being nice. There was definitely a deeper meaning behind her words. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was overanalyzing things. Maybe she was just being friendly, or perhaps I was just overly self-conscious after the locker room incident. Either way, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. A few days later, Laura came by my desk again. This time, she was a little more straightforward. "Hey, there's a new restaurant downtown. Have you heard of it?" she asked, glancing around the office. "Maybe we could go sometime, just the two of us. Grab a bite to eat?" Her tone was casual, but I could tell it wasn't just about the food. It felt like an invitation. Subtle, but still an invitation. I froze. This wasn't something I had expected from her. I'd been at the office long enough to know that a request like that didn't just come out of nowhere. She was married to my boss after all. She wasn't just another co-worker. I don't know," I stammered. "I mean, I'm kind of busy, you know?" She smiled, as if not taking no for an answer. "It's just dinner, Ryan. We're both adults. No pressure," she said, her voice soft. "I thought it might be nice to get to know each other better." In that moment, I realized this wasn't a simple gesture of friendliness. This was something more. She wasn't just being polite. She was actively pursuing me. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't naive, and I could clearly see what was happening. The fact that she was married to my boss made the situation even more complicated. It wasn't a scenario I ever imagined myself in. I had already been through a messy divorce, and the last thing I needed was more drama at the office. But there was no denying the chemistry between us. It was real and impossible to ignore. I told myself to be cautious and keep my distance, but Laura wasn't making it easy. The more she tried to draw me in, the more I found myself tempted. She had this charm about her, confident, persistent, maybe even a little too much so. After our conversation, I tried to focus on my work, but every time I looked up, she was there, looking at me with that knowing smile. It was becoming harder and harder to pretend nothing was happening. I wasn't sure where this was heading, but one thing was clear. I was caught in the middle of something that could change everything. And deep down, I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk away from it. By this point, I had spent a few weeks processing what was going on between Laura and me. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, that I was misinterpreting her behavior. But the more I avoided it, the more real it became. It wasn't just her words. It was how she looked at me, how she laughed at my jokes a little too long, and how she would move a little closer when talking, as if there was something personal behind the pleasantries. I tried to stay focused on my work, but it was difficult. Every time I walked into the office, I couldn't help but notice her presence, and I wasn't the only one who felt the tension. Some co-workers started whispering behind my back, joking about whether I was getting special treatment from Mrs. Robinson. It wasn't funny, but it didn't make the situation less real. Then, one afternoon, the invitation came. Laura was at my desk again. This time, her approach was different. No more small talk, no pretending. It was clear she had something specific in mind. She leaned against the edge of my cubicle, her voice lower, almost as if she wanted to create a more intimate moment. "Ryan, I've been thinking," she began, her gaze intense. "I know things are complicated, and I know you work with Rob, and this probably isn't the best idea. But I don't care. I think you're someone I want to spend time with." My pulse quickened, and I could feel my face warming. I was trapped, and there was no way out of this conversation. The walls of the office felt like they were closing in on me. "Laura, I'm not sure this is—" She cut me off, her tone firm but calm. "Don't pretend like you don't feel it too," she said, her voice steady. "You and I both know there's something between us. You can deny it all you want. But I see the way you look at me, and I know you're not completely oblivious to how I feel." I swallowed hard. It was like she could read my mind. The temptation was undeniable, but I had to remind myself that this was a huge mistake. I was being pulled into something I shouldn't be involved in. Not just because it was wrong, but because it could ruin everything I had worked for. My job, my reputation, everything. "I'm not—" I began, but she interrupted again. "You don't have to say anything," she said softly. "But I think you should come with me tonight. We could just talk, get to know each other better. No strings attached." The invitation hung in the air, heavy and persistent. I could feel the weight of it pressing on me. Everything inside me screamed to say no, but at the same time, a part of me wanted to go to see where this could lead. I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. My marriage had ended a while ago, and I hadn't really been with anyone since then. Laura was offering something new, something exciting, something risky. The clock seemed to tick louder in my mind as I weighed my options. I could walk away, set boundaries, and move on. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the attraction she had towards me. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. I wasn't blind to the fact that I was stepping into dangerous territory. But in that moment, I wasn't sure I had the willpower to walk away. Ah, I don't know, Laura, I said, shaking my head. This feels wrong. But she wasn't accepting no for an answer. Her eyes softened as she took a step closer. I'm not asking for anything huge, Ryan, she said. Just dinner, a chat. If you decide you want to walk away afterward, I'll understand, but I think we owe it to ourselves to at least give it a try. I could feel the weight on my chest. Every part of me knew this was a bad idea. But as I looked at her, I realized I wasn't certain I wanted to walk away anymore. A part of me actually wanted to say yes, to take the chance and see where it might lead. Finally, I sighed, knowing I was already too involved in this. Okay, just dinner, that's all. Laura smiled, and I felt a rush of relief, mixed with a lingering sense of guilt. I knew this would end badly, but for the first time in a while, I didn't care. I wasn't thinking about the aftermath, only the present, only what was right in front of me. As she walked away, I watched her go, already regretting my choice, but unable to stop myself from wondering what the evening would bring. The night of the dinner, I was a mess. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it was just dinner, nothing more, just two people talking. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. This was more than just dinner. Laura had made it clear from the start that it wasn't going to be a casual meal. She wanted something more, and I couldn't deny that, on some level, I was curious to see where this would go. I arrived at the restaurant a bit early. I didn't want to risk being late, especially given how uncomfortable things had already been between us. The moment I walked through the door, I felt out of place. The atmosphere was refined and intimate, the type of place you go to impress someone, not for an ordinary meal. Then I saw her. Laura looked stunning. She wore a deep red dress that fit her perfectly, and her makeup was flawless. She seemed like an entirely different person than the one I knew at work. This was a more polished version of her. She was graceful, confident, yet I could still see a vulnerability in her eyes I hadn't noticed before. She was more than just the boss's wife. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile, the kind that made everything else disappear. Ryan, she said, standing up. I'm so glad you came. I forced a smile, trying to hide the nervousness that was creeping up on me. Of course, Laura, I wouldn't miss it. We sat down, and the conversation started off smoothly. We talked about the restaurant, the food, the weather, typical small talk. But I could sense the tension between us, an unspoken undercurrent. Every time our eyes met, it felt like there was an undeniable spark. I tried to remind myself that this was wrong, that it wasn't just a casual dinner between co-workers. She was married, and I worked for her husband. This could ruin everything for both of us. But she wasn't making it easy. Laura seemed to be getting closer with each passing minute, leaning in when she spoke, her voice becoming softer, almost intimate. I tried to stay focused on our conversation, but it was difficult when each word she said felt like it was meant only for me. You know, Laura said, sipping her wine, I've always admired people who know exactly what they want out of life. You've always seemed so certain about your path, Ryan. It's refreshing. I shifted in my seat, trying to push aside the unease that was building inside me. I guess I just try to keep things simple, I replied. Focus on what really matters. She nodded, her gaze never leaving mine. I like that about you. You don't make things complicated. There was a pause before she added, I think that's what drew me to you in the first place. I didn't know how to respond to that. What do you say to something like that when it's coming from your boss's wife? My heart rate picked up, and the tension between us intensified. But there was something else too. Something that felt like an irresistible force pulling me closer. She was so near, and I couldn't ignore the attraction that had been building ever since the locker room incident. I didn't want to feel this way, but I couldn't help it. So, what do you want, Laura? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. I regretted the words the moment they left my mouth, but she didn't seem to mind. In fact, she leaned forward even more, her lips parting slightly, as though she was about to say something significant. I want... She paused, locking eyes with mine. I want to feel alive again, Ryan. I've been stuck in this routine for so long, just going through the motions. But when I'm with you, when I talk to you, I feel like there's more out there for me. A knot formed in my stomach as I realized how risky this situation was. She wasn't talking about dinner anymore. She was hinting at something deeper. And it wasn't just casual talk. This had been building up for some time, and I could feel it. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the growing sense of unease. Laura, this isn't right, I said, my voice barely audible. I'm not sure we should be doing this. She leaned back, her expression softening. I know this is complicated, but sometimes, Ryan, things happen for a reason. We're both adults, and we know what's going on here. No one is getting hurt. I wasn't convinced. My mind raced, running through all the possible outcomes. What would happen if anyone found out? What would this mean for my job or for her marriage? But as I looked at her sitting across from me, I knew I couldn't just walk away. I had already crossed a line by agreeing to this dinner. And now that I was here, I didn't know how to back out. The temptation was too powerful. I was already too deep in. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and getting closer. By the time the night ended, I still wasn't sure where we stood. I didn't know if this was just a one-time thing, or the beginning of something far more dangerous. All I knew was that I couldn't stop thinking about her. As we left the restaurant, Laura turned toward me, her hand brushing mine. I'm glad we did this, she said softly. Me too, I replied, though I knew I was lying. This wasn't the end. It had only just begun, and now I had to figure out how to escape before it was too late. After that dinner, everything changed, though neither of us could explain exactly how. Laura and I continued our quiet interactions at work. The brief exchanges when no one was watching. The fleeting glances that spoke volumes more than any words could. Part of me was terrified by what we were doing, but another part couldn't resist her pull. Her presence, her charm, the way she made me feel like I was the only person in the room. But even as we grew closer, the weight of our secret loomed over us. Every time we passed each other in the office, every time I saw Rob in the hallway, guilt gnawed at me. We were living a lie, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all going to fall apart at any moment. Then one morning, Rob called me into his office. The tension in the room was thick as he sat behind his desk, his face serious but not angry. I had no idea what to expect. Ryan, he began, his voice calm. I've been thinking about your future here. A knot tightened in my stomach. I knew what was coming. He was going to offer me the promotion I had worked so hard for. It was finally within reach. But as I sat there listening to him, I couldn't shake the guilt that was eating me from the inside. I think you deserve more responsibility around here, Rob continued. I've been impressed with your work ethic. You've been a valuable asset to the company for years now. I nodded, but my mind wasn't really on his words. I was struggling to focus, to maintain the professional mask I had perfected over the years. All I could think about was Laura and the secret we were hiding. The fear of being caught consumed me. Later that day, I saw Laura in the hallway. She was standing by the elevators, looking lost in thought. When she saw me, her expression softened. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't know how to answer. Was I okay? How could I be, knowing what we were doing? Knowing that every moment spent together was taking us deeper into something I wasn't sure I could handle. But at the same time, I couldn't walk away. I didn't want to. I don't know, I admitted. I feel like we're living in two different worlds. One where everything is fine, and another where we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Laura sighed, her eyes filled with the same worry I felt. I know, but what are we supposed to do? It's like we can't stop, but we don't know how to keep going either. That was the problem. We had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. But we had no idea where we were headed. Part of me wanted to tell her that we should just walk away, end this before it got any more complicated, before it ruined everything. But another part of me, the part that had been secretly yearning for her these past few weeks, wanted to hold on to what we had. What we had was special, unique, even if it was a secret. Maybe we just keep going, I suggested quietly. Maybe we leave it like this, keep it a secret for a little longer. We don't think about the future, not yet. She looked at me for a long moment, weighing her feelings against the consequences of what we were doing. I don't know if that's enough, Ryan, she said. I don't know if I can keep pretending forever. I nodded, understanding. It was hard to live in the shadows, but the thought of giving it all up, of walking away from everything we had, felt even harder. That night, we met in a quiet corner of a nearby bar, the place we had gone to on those rare occasions when we could escape the office for a little while. We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. I don't know what to do anymore, Laura confessed, breaking the silence. I keep thinking about it, about how this can't go on, but I don't want it to stop either. I feel the same, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to hurt anyone, least of all Rob. But I can't just forget about this, about you. We sat there for what felt like hours, not saying much, just drinking and letting the weight of it all settle in. Finally, I spoke. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now, I said. Maybe we just keep it a secret a little longer. Take it one day at a time, until we figure out what comes next. Laura didn't answer immediately, but after a pause she nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. Yeah, maybe that's all we can do. We didn't know what the future held. We didn't know if we would find a way to make this work, or if it would eventually fall apart. But for now, we had each other, and that was all that mattered. As we left the bar, our hands brushed together, and for a moment, everything felt like it was going to be okay. We didn't have the answers, and we didn't know what the next step would be. But for the first time in a long time, we weren't alone in this anymore. We walked into the unknown together, uncertain of where it would take us, but knowing that, for now, we were content to stay where we were. In the end, we didn't make any major decisions. We just kept going in secret, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. And maybe that was the most honest thing we could do.